Hi everyone! Despite being included in his catalogue of works, there are doubts that J.S. Bach composed the Capriccio and the suite to which it belongs. In this video, therefore, I'll be referring to the work's creator simply as the composer. A similarity exists between rondo form and fugue, as both use recurring material. In a rondo, the theme, typically found initially in the work's opening bars, periodically returns, sometimes in a different key to the one in which it was originally presented. In a fugue, the subject-answer pair, introduced during the work's exposition, also periodically returns and is often in different keys. For subsequent re-entries, however, sometimes only the subject and/or the answer are used instead of the complete subject-answer pair. The subject and answer, then, are typically the only elements which recur through a fugue's duration, with the episodes providing the connection between the recurring material. In this fugue, however, the composer has constructed the episodes in a series of sections which are linked between the subject re-entries. Some of these linked episodes are related and some recur, creating recognizable melodic harmonic units, providing a complementary set of material, which in some cases is as memorable as the subjects. To give an idea of contemporary thought regarding the role and construction of fugal episodes, I'll briefly consider Friedrich Marburg's views given in his 1753 fugue treatise. Marburg's 7 points regarding fugal episodes may be summarized as follows. The episode should be related to the theme and it should be well adapted to the counterpart. It shouldn't contain any melodic features which cannot be easily developed in all voices by transposition or imitation. Melodic ideas for the episode should come from the fugue subject and counterpart, or should be freely composed. It will be necessary to master the various kinds of imitation to write well-devised episodes. We may also add, fugal episodes are often written using invertible counterpoint and sequence, and may be modulatory. Episodes must not be too long or too frequent. They should be arranged that they can be easily interrupted by a thematic entrance, unless they end in a cadence at which the theme would re-enter. The episodes need not be formed by all voices so that the theme may re-enter all the more clearly and emphatically. Marburg's 7th point is more a general statement about fugal writing. All fugues should end with a statement of the theme or a short harmonic turn following the theme. Through these points, Marburg says nothing about the same episodes recurring, although he does state they shouldn't be too long or too frequent. And although not explicitly stated, we may infer that for Marburg, episodes should in a sense be considered melodically subordinate to the melodies of the fugue subject-answer pair. I'll return to Marburg's points periodically throughout my discussion of the Capriccio fugue, but to better understand the episodes, we must first consider the Capriccio's subject-answer pair, which I'll do by discussing their introduction in the exposition. The Capriccio is a double fugue, as its subject and answer are each accompanied by a second subject. The answer is tonal, with the subject's leap of a fifth, answered here with a leap of a fourth. The subject prolongs its fifth degree and concludes with a descent to the tonic of the key in which it's presented. Here in the exposition in the key of G minor, for example, the note D is prolonged, sounding again here, beginning the stepwise descent to the tonic note G. In the key of G minor, the G of the answer also sounds again, beginning a stepwise descent to G minor's dominant note D. The Capriccio's answer, however, is modulating, suggesting the dominant key of the subject, here D minor. During this fugue, the composer will typically either modulate to the dominant key, or, as here, treat the accidental suggesting that key as secondary harmony in the tonic. To conclude the fugue's exposition, the final answer entry does modulate into the key of D minor, and in the fugue's subject re-entries, the composer sometimes affects the modulation or treats the accidentals as being part of secondary chords in the prevailing key. The fugue's second subjects accompanying the subject and answer are both constructed around a descent of a minor sixth. In the key of G minor, the second subject accompanying the subject descends from E flat to G, from G minor's sixth to first degree, and the answer's second subject descends from B flat to D, either the third and fifth degrees of G minor if no modulation occurs, or the sixth and first degrees of the dominant key D minor. The second subjects also begin at the same metric position against the subject-answer pair, creating a series of thirds with the subject and answer. As expected, they are also written using invertible counterpoint, with the composer initially placing them beneath the exposition's first subject-answer pair, but then inverting them for the exposition's remaining entries. The exposition then has two subject-answer entries, the second pair of which modulates into the key of D minor. The first recurrence of the fugue subject-answer pair, this time in the key of E flat major, begins in bar 63. Here the answer's modulation may be heard moving into the key of B flat major, although another subject entry, beginning in bar 71, which lacks its answer, takes the work back into the key of E flat major. In this recurrence, the answer and concluding second subject entry enter above their respective second subjects, while the composer places the initial subject entry, beginning in bar 63, beneath its second subject. The second recurrence of the fugue subject-answer pair, now in the key of C minor, begins in bar 100. As with the exposition, here the composer uses two subject-answer entries, with the first pair entering above their respective second subjects, and the second pair entering beneath. Here, during the first subject-answer entry, the composer affects the expected modulation, moving back into the work's tonic key of G minor. G minor is maintained through the second subject-answer pair, with the C minor accidentals being heard as part of secondary and Neapolitan harmony. The third and final recurrence of the fugue subject-answer pair begins in bar 167, probably because it's the fugue's final subject-answer re-entry. It begins in the tonic key of G minor. This entry, however, is a little unusual, as it begins with an answer entry which lacks its second subject. No modulation occurs with this entry, and the composer treats the answer's accidentals as being part of secondary dominant harmony to G minor's dominant. The subject-answer pair following the answer entry does include its second subjects, which enter respectively beneath and above the subject and answer. Here the composer does affect the answer's modulation, taking the work briefly into the key of D minor. Between the conclusion of the exposition in bar 17 and the first subject-answer pair re-entry beginning in bar 63, the composer includes 4 different episodes. The first episode, which I've labelled A, occupies bars 17 to 23 and remains in the key of D minor. It's based on a partial cycle of fifths progression and contains an intervallic pattern. I'll go into greater detail about each episode's construction after giving an overview of their basic features. The greater detail I'll present in a series of videos which will also discuss any changes that may occur between an episode's first and second occurrences. These videos will be released individually on Patreon. The fugue's second episode, which I've labelled B, occupies bars 24 to 38 and also remains in the key of D minor until its final bar, where it then moves into the key of G minor. This episode is based on a descending stepwise bass line and also includes an intervallic pattern in the upper parts. Occupying bars 39 to 51, the third episode, which I've labelled C, remains in the key of G minor throughout and is based on a cycle of fifths progression. It also uses an invertible counterpoint between its upper two parts. The fourth episode, and the final one before the first subject-answer re-entry, I've labelled D. It occupies bars 52 to 63 and moves from the key of G minor to C minor to B-flat major and finally to E-flat major for the subject-answer re-entry. Each of these keys essentially uses the same 4-bar material. After the first subject-answer re-entry, the fifth episode, which I've labelled E, and which is related to episode D, occupies bars 77 to 88. This episode remains in the key of E-flat major throughout and includes an intervallic pattern. The sixth episode, and the final one before the second subject-answer re-entry, I've labelled F. It occupies bars 89 to 100 and remains in the key of G minor throughout. It's based on a descending third cycle and includes an intervallic pattern. In bars 118 to 129, after the second subject-answer re-entries, episode B returns, now beginning in the key of G minor, but moving to C minor in bar 122. As before, episode B is here followed in bars 130 to 141 by episode C, which here remains in the key of C minor. A new episode, which I've labelled episode G, occupies bars 142 to 161. This episode essentially remains in the key of C minor until its penultimate bar, where it moves into the key of G minor. Episode G is based on a series of incomplete descending fifth intervals in the lowest part, which move up by step every 2 bars from the note C to G. In bars 162 to 167, before the third and final subject-answer re-entries, episode A returns, now in the key of G minor. After the re-entries, episode F returns in bars 180 to 195, where it begins in the key of B-flat major, but moves into G minor before its conclusion. Episode E is again used in bars 196 to 207, where it begins in the key of G minor before moving through B-flat major to E-flat major. Beginning in bar 208 and lasting until the work's conclusion in bar 236 is an episode I've labelled H, which isn't strictly an episode as it doesn't connect subject-answer re-entries, as the fugue subject and answer don't return after bar 180. Between bars 208 and 220, however, we could say that the purpose of these bars is to take the work from the key of E-flat major to the tonic key of G minor for the work's final cadence 16 bars later. The material in bars 208 to 220 also include figures from the work's subject and preceding episodes, which I'll discuss in more detail in the series of videos on Patreon. I hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching. See you next time.